Welcome to the St. Paul's Cathedral Forum. Today is actually a very special forum in that we are, in this virtual meeting, able to come from the Oakerhater chapel beneath the picture of David Pendleton, Oakerhater, St. David. And we celebrate his feast day the first weekend in September always. And so it's a pleasure for us to be here. With me is Blue Clark. Blue is a now retired OCU law professor and published author of several books, basically on the Oklahoma tribes of Oklahoma and also doing business with native entities. Welcome, Blue. And for the third time, our guest is Harvey Pratt. Harvey has preached the last two Oakerhater Sundays and comes to us with a strong Southern Cheyenne heritage, and he's recently recognized by the Cheyenne Arapaho tribe as an outstanding Southern Cheyenne. He is also the great-grandson of Edmund Gurrier, who was a scout, guide, interpreter, and an actual survivor of the Sand Creek Massacre, which occurred in 1864, when the Black Kettles camp was attacked unprovoked by the Colorado militia, and is something that is still very painful to Cheyenne. He is also great-great-grandson of William Bent. And Blue, tell us a little bit about Bent's Fort, that history.
Thank you, Buzz. Bent's Fort is very famous in the Great Plains region. Bent ended up marrying a daughter of an Arapaho leader and became very influential in the growing trade with presence of fur trappers, traders, occasional U.S. cavalry troops passing by, a whole host which grew along the river channels across the Great Plains. And Bent's Fort became a focal point for tribal trade, intertribal trade. It changed its location over time, but basically in the Colorado region, and became a center of tribal gatherings, intertribal gatherings, and trade, and helped contribute to the splitting of the tribes over time.
Harvey, anything to add to that? That's pretty good.
Well, his daughter, William's daughter, after he married Al Woman, was Julia Bent, and she was my great-grandmother who married Edmund Carrier.
Mm-hmm.
And Carrier, their allotment land is just north of Gary, Oklahoma. And Gary, Oklahoma was named after my great-grandfather. So,
Wow.
So that's just to add to that. That's I'm very proud of my heritage.
Harvey began a career with the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation in 1972 and retired in 1992 as the assistant director, and then came back to OSBI and as a forensic specialist and stayed until a second retirement. Was that 2015 or 2017? He's nationally renowned and respected for his work in post-mortem drawing and skeletal reconstruction of both victims and assailants as well. He is a retired United States Marine Corps veteran and served in Vietnam. How long were you there in Vietnam?
I was there 7 months with the 3rd Recon Battalion, and we were there at Da Nang Air Base, the Marine Air Base, to protect the aircraft and the other Marines, and we were also assigned to support ARVN military and to pick up pilots that were shot down. And so we would helicopter in and pick up pilots, and if we couldn't restore the aircraft, we blew it up.
How old were you then?
20.
There's a picture on the internet that you'll see if you Google up Harvey Pratt of him standing on what looks like steel plates, which must have been the name runway, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Tarmac. Yeah.
Tarmac, yeah. Harvey is a member of the Council of 44 Peace Chiefs, a Cheyenne beloved group. Enlarge a little bit on the Council of 44.
Well, the Council of 44 was given to us by Sweet Medicine and gave us our rules, and the old chiefs followed those through. We have 4 principal chiefs and 40 sub chiefs, and I'm not a principal chief. I'm one of the sub chiefs, the way they refer to as a sub chief. I've been a chief since 1995, and we periodically in the Chief's Lodge, and we'll discuss things and talk about things and make sure that we're planning for their ceremonies and talk about how we can help the people. And chiefs don't run the tribe. Chiefs are the spiritual people for the tribe, and it's up to us to make sure that we keep our ceremonies and things as they were.
Blue, I think, aren't there 4 or 5 warrior societies?
There's 4. There's 4 Cheyenne warrior societies. There used to be more than that, but the 5th society is a chief society. So there's 4 war societies and then the chief society, and they all participate in the various ceremonies.
But I guess that makes you actually a member of a warrior society?
Well, I initially applied once I reached a certain age, and I always kept my little boy name, which was Vihunchkis, means he's going to be a chief. And they gave me that name because I was born in a little house in El Reno, and when I was born, I was a veil baby, or some people call them cloak bearers. And when my mother's aunt saw me, they said, "Oh, look at him, he wants to be a chief." So they gave me that name, and I kept that name. And I kept that name all throughout my adulthood. And when I became a chief, I took my great-great-grandfather's name, who was White Thunder, and he was an arrow keeper. And he was killed at Wolf Creek in the battle between the Cheyenne Arapahoes fighting the Kiowas, Comanches, and Prairie Apaches. So I kept his name, and I took his name because it always reminded me of who I am and to be respectful, so that I do not want to dishonor that name. So that's the reason I took that name. And before I was a chief, I asked to join the dog soldiers because my whole family were dog soldiers. And so I made application to it, and then the chiefs came and got me. The chiefs came and got me, and they said, "No, we want you to be one of our chiefs. They said, we've been looking at you. We've been looking at you, and we want you." And so, since that was my name, my little boy name, and I always thought about being a chief, but I never thought I would be. And they came and got me. So I never did get to be a dog soldier, even though I made application with them, because the chiefs came and stole me away.
Before any battle, the warriors would always prepare their medicine to protect them in battle, and carried, I guess, that bless their shields, and what all would they do to prepare medicine?
Well, a lot of times you have to have a little time, to do your medicine. If you have a special paint or a medicine paint that you paint yourself, or you dress a certain way, so when you're killed, you'll be presentable to the Creator. He'll see coming in. So a lot of times when we paint people after they passed, we paint them a certain way, so our relatives will see my spirit coming, and they'll see that the painting's on my face and know that it's one of the Cheyenne people, and they'll come and greet us into the afterlife. So a lot of little things that you carry, that they give you for medicines for battle, and it's important to be first. In warriors, it's always important to be first, and so that's how come they count coup 1, 2, and 3, and so it was important for me to go to Vietnam in a recon unit. It was the first combat unit into South Vietnam for Marines, and I was the only Indian, and so I was the first combat Marine into South Vietnam, Indian. And so I always have to take a lot of pride in that, and everybody, the guys, my other Marines would say, oh, let the Indian do it. They're good at that. So that, you know, those things make you feel good. You know, you feel good about that, being that people respect you in that way, and we respect our ways of being warriors and being first, and so it's important to us.
But if I might interrupt and say, you were also selected as a great honor about the Native American Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., and that, in my mind, follows from what you had just said.
I was one of 413 people that submitted from 5 different countries.
Whoa.
5 different countries, and they narrowed it down to 120, and then they narrowed it. And this was a blind competition. Nobody knew who you were. I was a number. That's all they knew. I was a number. And so they, out of that, when they narrowed it down to 120, then they narrowed it down to 5, and I was one of the finalists. And finalists were from, was a Vietnamese boy, and there was a guy from a Maori from New Zealand, and a young lady from North New York, and then the other team was a Native American team from Oklahoma, which was Dan Jones and Kelly Haney, and that was 5 of us, and we didn't know who anybody was until that day, and then they introduced us. And this memorial was a $17 million budget, and they had hardly any money at all. And this is all by donation. There's no federal money in it at all. It's all by donation. So we've raised a good portion of that 17 million, and enough to build it and enough to maintain it. So, and I think that's important. And the dedication is supposed to be November the 11th, but with this pandemic, it's been postponed.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, it has been postponed?
Yes.
Okay.
The procession, they're expecting 30 to 40,000 Native American veterans to show up. You know, Native Americans are the biggest volunteers. Up to 16% of Native American people volunteer in the military. And all the other nations, all the other races are less than 1%, but 16% of Indians, men and women, join the military to fight for this country, fight for this land, and it's important to us. This land is God gave the North American continent and South to the Indians. There was nobody there before. The Indians came, he gave it to them first. They inhabited it, they kept this land, and they asked me that. I said, because this is Indian country, this is Indian land, that's why we fight for it. We'll always be Indian land, we'll always fight for this country and this land. Have great respect for our flag and our veterans and our victory songs. And
you know, in our state song, it says, we belong to the land, and the land we belong to is grand. I don't think Rogers and Hammerstein knew what he was particularly writing, but it couldn't be truer than it is for Native or indigenous people, as we've begun to call ourselves, some, because we were here before there were Americans, so we're indigenous natives. So, Harvey is a well-loved artist, and he works in several different media: oil, acrylic, watercolor, metal, clay, and wood, and all self-taught, I understand.
pretty much, you know, I've learned from my grandfather and from my brother. I followed my older brother's footsteps in a lot of ways. He was a great artist. He was a wonderful artist. I've always tried to stay true to my culture, what I do. I tried to step outside of that and painted some Southwest stuff, and some of those Southwest Indians said, that ain't right, you know? You're not painting that right, so that's not what we do. And so I thought, I need to stay with what I know. So I quit trying to go into other areas and paint what I know. And I think that's important, that you're true to what you know and your own culture, rather than trying to step out and interpret something when you don't really know what it actually means. Even though Native people, we're the same, but we're different. And that was my plan for my design for the National Native American Veterans Memorial, was how do you incorporate 573 tribes without saying a name or a specific culture. And I said, the way to do that, I said, let me dream on it. Let me think about it. And I got up and I made a drawing that morning, and my wife came in, Gina, came down and looked at it. She said, Harvey, that's pretty good. So I expanded on it, and I incorporated a path of life, of how we are to be act, how we're to treat ourselves and treat other people, and get into the circle of life, the warrior circle of honor, and come into that harmony. You get into harmony with the elements, with the water and the fire and the air and the earth. And once you get into there, and then there's the directions, and then there's the cardinal points. And then I put lances in there for the defense of our homeland, and the arrow, not the feathers. And then I added prayer cloths. So my design is timeless. It's timeless. You look at some memorials, and you can tell, oh, that's from the Revolution, and yeah, that's the Second World War. But my grandpa could walk in there and he would recognize those symbols. And then my fellow veterans, Native veterans, can walk in there and they'll recognize those things. And my grandchildren will do that, and their grandchildren will go in there and they'll recognize all these things. It's not dated, it's timeless. And I think that was so important when they were looking at those things, that they realized that. And this design is for Native veterans, men and women, and war mothers and families. And so it's, Native people recognize things, and non-Natives may not recognize them, but we welcome all veterans to come in there and participate and be energized and be blessed, and to leave some energy there in that memorial, so that we can be blessed by all those different 573 tribes that are coming there and do a ceremony, and it'll become a special place.
I think at this point we need to say that this is being built in Washington, D.C. at the Smithsonian Museum for the American Indians. And there's a veteran memorial for indigenous people.
It's the first one right off the Capitol. We're right there on the grounds, and you can see the Capitol from our memorial there on the east side of the grounds. And it's the last one. And this memorial is the only one that has a sound system in it. So I can play, they can play the flag songs of the 573 federally recognized tribes. They can play the veteran song. So when you walk down there, it'll be very quietly, very softly, and you'll hear the drumming and the singing. And you can make a request from your tribe. Say, look, we're bringing our tribal people here today, and we want to see the Choctaw tribal song and the veteran song, and you'll play those things.
Go ahead.
I would speculate as well from your description about the basic symbolism that any indigenous, Maori and others who come would find commonality.
Yes. Yeah, they do. The Hawaiians did too. They recognized it, and the Aleutians, the Eskimos, they're involved. They recognized all, because they had people like that on the committee, to judge, and stand from all these different tribes. Smithsonian sent people around for 2 years interviewing Indian tribes and trying to find out what they wanted. So it's been a great experience.
Wow. In 2005, the Red Earth Festival designated Harvey as a master artist, and also selected him to be the honored one, which is a great tribute. And Governors Keating and Henry appointed you, I believe, to the Oklahoma Arts Council.
Yes.
As well. Harvey's art is displayed in several permanent collections, including the National Park Service, Smithsonian, Sequoia National Research Center, and the University of Oklahoma. I first saw one of Harvey's paintings in the National Park Service in Cheyenne, the Battle of the Washita, and it's called Crimson Dawn. And I understand there is a story behind that painting with some of those women that survived it, I guess.
Yes, it's a story that I heard from Lawrence Hart, that these two women were his relatives, Cornstalk, and they were, when they jumped from their teepee and was running, they were barefoot. They were running through the snow, and there was a lot of shooting and carnage going on, and one of the soldiers saw him running. He rode up next to him on his horse, and he looked at him, and rather than shoot him, he let him go. And that's why I thought, you know, in all this carnage and all this terrible things that were going on and people being killed, somebody said, I'm not doing that. I'm going to protect these people and let them go. And he let these two women go, and they had an anniversary 10 years later, and they met again. And they met again after 10 years, and they recognized one another. So I thought, what a great thing, out of all of this terrible things that happened, would tell a story of compassion. And that's why I call it Crimson Dawn, as in the morning everything was aflame and then burning.
When I first saw the painting, I made the natural assumption that the soldier was going to kill them. And this is what gives this painting special meaning to me. But let me ask you this, do you have a favorite of all your paintings?
You know, that's hard to say, because I like all my paintings. You know, I like them all. They all have a meaning. They all, to me, I tell stories with my paintings, you know. I like the painting Red Earth, the people of Red Earth. It depicts the various clans and associations and things that people do. And I really like that. It was Red Earth's poster in 2005, so I like that. But I've done several paintings. I've done some hide paintings. I did the Sand Creek massacre killing on a buffalo hide. And I'm doing the memorial in Denver, Colorado, of the Sand Creek massacre. And I'm doing a heroic size sculpture of a young Indian woman who has lost her baby, and she's holding an empty cradle, and she's a Cheyenne woman. And the way they used to say when that was going on, the people that were dying and were wounded, they said, "Don't forget us, remember us." And that's what we do now. We try to remember those people, those victims. And among Cheyenne people, the Cheyenne symbol for them is an Indian, and this is Cheyenne, when you tap your fingers like this. And some people say it's because we had striped arrows, and some people say it's because we cut ourselves when we mourn. And so that's what she did, and she extends her right hand. She has cut her finger off. And she cut her finger off because she has lost her husband, she lost her baby, she probably lost her grandpa, her daddy, and she herself is probably going to be killed. And so she cuts her legs, cut her hair off, and to mourn for her family and victims.
When will that be established?
Well, it got real quiet for a while, and now it's picked back up. The new governor gave us a location on the grounds. And it is where there used to be a Civil War monument, and the rioters tore it down. And the governor said, you can have that spot. So we're working on it again.
Tell us about the Oklahoma Centennial blanket that you designed.
I designed the Oklahoma Centennial blanket based on the counties and the colors. I have a bands at the top, yellow and black, and the yellow is for the beginning, the new day, the beginning, and the black is for the mystery of the night. So there's a mystery of what happens at night in spirits, and then the 77 stars go around it, and there's an opening there so the spirits can come and go through the blanket. And I put the scissor tail in every corner, a symbol of the scissor tails in each corner. I put the Cheyenne Morning Star in there, and I put an eagle on it, and the Oklahoma Shield in there, and then the color's red, and it reverses to a negative on the other side. And so I submitted that design, and it was chosen by the Centennial Committee. And then I submitted the design to the Pendleton Blanket Company in Oregon, and they asked me to come over there, and on the way, Gina and I were in a cab, and I had a little piece of paper, notepad, and I made a drawing of the blanket and they wanted me to listen to what they would want to do, and I said, I did that in about 5 minutes. And I got there and I handed it to them, and they said, that's it, that's the blanket, you know. So I designed a Veterans Memorial blanket that's on sale now.
Really?
And you can see it online. If you go to my website, you'll see it, and it has the earth colors in it. It has the sacred colors in it. It has the earth, the center of the earth, and the sun, as it radiates out, and the water and the green, and it has the hands. You know, in the Plains people, the hand sign means you've defeated your enemy. And so I put 4 hand signs in it, and I put eagle feathers hanging off of the back on the hand here. And so on the east and west side and the north and the south is an oblong, looks like an oblong stone. And actually what it is, it's the grandfather stones that the museum put on each corner, east, west, north, and south. And they have, and the north stone came out of northern Canada, and it's 4 billion years old. The south stone came out of Chile. Came all the way to Chile, brought up here. The east stone came out of South Carolina, and it sits on the east side. And the west side is a stone that came out of Hawaii, because Hawaii is the newest little island. And they said, we're going to loan you our stone. You can't have it for 25 years, you can keep it, but then in 25 years, we're going to come and get it, but we'll bring you another one. Because those stones are our ancestors, because that's where we sprang from. So, and, you know, it's just little interesting things like that. So I put all those things in that blanket, and they said, hey, Harvey, that's it.
Terrific. You mentioned you had an ancestor that was killed at the Battle of Wolf Creek. An interesting story is that a Cheyenne warrior, Sandman, was unearthed in 1973, but he'd been killed in the Battle of Wolf Creek in 1837. And when he was uncovered, he was found in full Cheyenne regalia, meaning that he was obviously a man of great importance. The Battle of Wolf Creek was a battle between the Cheyenne and then the Kiowas and Comanches against them, and you actually had an ancestor who was killed there.
White Thunder was killed. He was an arrow keeper.
In 2001, under the direction of the Cheyenne tribe and I guess the state of Oklahoma, Harvey was asked to do a skeletal reconstruction. That's 164 years after Sandman was actually killed. And we talked some about the medicine that warriors carried into battle with them. And when Harvey prepared to do this reconstruction, the warriors' medicine was still strong. And you had to go through some steps before you were able to start talking a little bit about that, if you would.
Well, he was at OU, and they had him in the bone room, and it's where all these prehistoric animals were, you know, thousands of years old bones, and they had him on a table, and they had him covered, and Gene and I went in there, and took the cover off, and I said, well, let's take some photographs. I said, so we'll see a progression of how we're going to do this. And so Gina took the camera and tried to take his picture, and the camera wouldn't work. She turned to me, camera worked. Took back over here, camera wouldn't work. Took to me, camera took my picture again. So I said, let's wait. I said, we got this Cheyenne guy coming here, and I said, he's going to do a ceremony on this. I said, let's not do anything else. So Gordon Yellowman came in, and he did a ceremony, and he blessed us, and we were able to take a picture. And so we reconstructed him. He had in his grave was found right at the corner of a house. It was no further away than this wall from the corner of the house, and it was kind of on a slope, and it washed away, and they started seeing some bones, and they called in the Historical Society to come in and dig him up. They trenched around him and slid a piece of metal and lifted the whole grave out. And he had conchos tied in his hair. He had steel armbands, coiled armbands, and the one on his left arm was cut in pieces so that they could get. He apparently had broken that arm, and they cut it, but they didn't want to destroy it, so they just cut it in pieces so that they could slip it off of him, and then he put it back on him. And he had conchos tied in his hair. He had arrows. He had a knife. He had buffalo hide and leggings and beaded moccasins, and he had all those things in there with him, so that we gathered all those things up and we duplicated them and put them on my sculpture. And then when we took Sandman back to Fort Supply. They reburied him. We took all of his things that he originally had and reburied him there. We didn't keep him. We put everything with him because that's what everything he was supposed to take with him. He was well thought of. Apparently, he was well dressed. And when they told me that I was reconstructing a man from that battle, a Cheyenne man, I thought that could be my grandpa. That could be my great grandpa. He said he was a suicide man. He gave up his life. He said he was an arrow keeper, and when those 44 they were bowstrings. Those bowstrings wanted to go on a raid, and they wanted him to go ahead and bless the arrows and have that ceremony. He said it's not time yet, and they got after him and they whipped him with their quirts. And he said this is going to be bad, but he did it, and they left, and they got caught out on the plains and were all killed. They killed all of them. The Kiowas and the Comanches killed them all, and so they made peace later on in 38, 39. They made peace, but my grandpa said a lot of these people blamed me for losing their relatives because I wouldn't that ceremony, and I cursed them, and they blamed me. He said, I'm going to give up my life in this fight. So they called them suicide bullets. They promised to give their life up in a battle, and that's what he did. He was an old man. He wasn't some kid. He was an old man. He said, but I'm going to die in there.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And the Cheyenne wanted this to be a dignified reconstruction, repatriated and burial back at Fort Supply. And we've come to the time to close our forum, but I wanted to offer it in closing a quote that Harvey made regarding Sandman. He said, human life is important. It is not a matter of the present, it is a matter of life, that someone lived, sometime, somewhere. This individual contributed to us all, and we should respect that spark of humanity. This man touched those he lived with, and he touches us now. I'd say that was true then, and it's true now. So, Harvey, thank you for joining us again. I'm sure
it's been a blessing. It's been a blessing for all of us.
For those of you who are watching this, if you have questions, contact us at St. Paul's, and we'll either go to Harvey or Blue and come up with an answer, because this has been a most interesting forum. Thank you for watching it.